The stagecoach rattled violently as it hit another rut in the dusty road, jolting Virginia Armstrong awake from her fitful slumber. Her hand instinctively clutched the creased photograph in her pocket, the only image she had of the man she'd agreed to marry, a stranger whose penmanship had won her heart through months of correspondence. The year was 1875, and Virginia was hurtling toward a new life in Wyoming territory, leaving behind the ashes of her old existence in Boston. "Not much longer now, miss," the driver called back. "Clearwater's just beyond that ridge." Virginia nodded, though no one could see her. Her throat felt parched from the journey, her blue traveling dress rumpled and covered in a fine layer of dust. 24 years old and traveling alone across the country, to marry a man she'd never met. Her friends back east had called her mad. But desperation had a way of making the impossible seem reasonable. The letters from Yates Wilson had started arriving 6 months ago, after she'd placed an advertisement in a matrimonial gazette. A rancher with a young son, seeking a wife to help build a life in Wyoming territory. His words had been straightforward but gentle, describing his ranch, his daily routine, his hopes for a partner. No flowery sentiments or grand promises, just honesty that had somehow felt more romantic than any sonnet. The coach crested the final hill, revealing the small frontier town of Clearwater sprawled across the valley floor. Virginia's heart hammered against her ribs. Would he recognize her from the small photograph she'd sent? Would she recognize him? Most importantly, would the reality of Yates Wilson match the man she'd constructed in her imagination? As the coach rolled to a stop in front of the town's only hotel, Virginia gathered her courage along with her small carpet bag. The driver helped her down, her legs unsteady after days of travel. Mrs. Armstrong, a tall boy of perhaps 12, approached her, hat in hand. He had sandy blonde hair and a serious expression that made him seem older than his years. "Miss Armstrong," she corrected gently. "Though not for long, I suppose. You must be Thomas." The boy nodded, studying her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. His eyes widened slightly, and he took a small step backward. "Is something wrong?" Virginia asked, adjusting her bonnet. "You look just like Hope," the boy said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just like my mama." Virginia felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Yates had mentioned his late wife only briefly in his letters, that she had passed from fever 3 years prior, leaving him to raise their son alone. He had never described her appearance, nor sent a photograph of her. "Your father, is he here?" Virginia managed to ask, looking around the dusty street. Thomas shook his head. "Pa couldn't leave the ranch. There's trouble with the cattle. He sent me with Mr. Grayson to fetch you." He pointed to an older man loading supplies into a wagon. "I see," Virginia said, trying to hide her disappointment. She had imagined their first meeting differently. "Pa said to tell you he's awful sorry he couldn't come himself, but that he's got the house all ready and he'll be waiting when we get back." Thomas paused, still staring at her. "Are you really going to be my new mother?" The directness of the question caught Virginia off guard. "Well, your father and I have an arrangement, but we'll need to see if we suit each other first." Thomas nodded solemnly. "I hope you stay. Pa's been awful lonely." "And I've been wishing for—" He stopped himself, suddenly embarrassed. "For what?" Virginia encouraged. "For someone like you," he admitted. "Someone who could make him smile again." Virginia felt a wave of emotion wash over her. This boy needed a mother as much as Yates needed a wife. And perhaps she needed them both just as desperately. "The wagon's ready," called Mr. Grayson, a weathered man with kind eyes. "It's a 2-hour ride to the Wilson place. Better get started if we want to make it before sundown." As they traveled through the rolling grasslands, Virginia absorbed everything she could about her new home. The endless blue sky stretched to touch the distant mountains, while tall grasses swayed like a golden sea. So different from the crowded streets of Boston, where she'd spent her entire life until now. "Pa says you're a schoolteacher," Thomas said as the wagon bumped along. "I was," Virginia confirmed, "for 6 years. We don't have a proper school in Clearwater yet, just Mrs. Pettigrew, who teaches the little ones in her parlor 3 days a week. I've mostly learned from books Pa orders from back east. Perhaps we could continue your education together," Virginia suggested. "I brought some of my favorite books with me." This earned her the first genuine smile she'd seen from the boy. "I'd like that, Miss Armstrong. You can call me Virginia if you'd like." Thomas shook his head. "Pa says I should call you Mrs. Wilson once you're married, out of respect." Virginia felt her cheeks warm. The reality of her situation hit her anew in less than a day. She would be married to a stranger and become this boy's stepmother. "There it is," Thomas said suddenly, pointing ahead. "Wilson Ranch." The property came into view as they topped a small rise, a sturdy 2-story house built of logs and stone, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals containing horses. Smoke curled from the chimney, and lanterns were being lit as dusk approached. It was neither as grand as she had feared nor as humble as she had worried. It was simply a home, solid and well-maintained. As the wagon rolled to a stop in the yard, the front door opened. A tall man stepped out onto the porch, removing his hat as he did so. Virginia felt her breath catch. Yates Wilson was not what she had expected. The photograph she carried was several years old, she realized immediately. The man before her was perhaps 35, with sun-darkened skin and light brown hair that curled slightly where it touched his collar. His face was leaner than in the picture, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of both laughter and hardship. He wore simple clothes, a blue shirt, dark trousers, and boots that had seen many miles. "Miss Armstrong," he said, his voice deep and steady as he approached the wagon. "Welcome to Clearwater." He offered his hand to help her down, his touch warm and solid. "Mr. Wilson," she replied, finding herself suddenly shy despite months of intimate correspondence. Standing before him now, she felt like a stranger. "You must be exhausted from your journey," he said, his eyes a clear, striking blue taking in her travel-worn appearance. "Thomas and I have prepared a room for you. You can rest and refresh yourself before supper." "Thank you," Virginia said, grateful for his consideration. "It has been a long journey." "Longer than just the miles, I expect," Yates said quietly, and something in his understanding gaze told her he knew exactly what she had left behind. Thomas hovered nearby, still watching her with that strange intensity. "Pa, doesn't she look just like the painting of Mama, the one in your room?" An uncomfortable silence fell. Yates cleared his throat. "Thomas, help Mr. Grayson unload Miss Armstrong's trunks." His voice was gentle but firm, leaving no room for argument. Thomas reluctantly obeyed, but not before giving Virginia another long look. "I apologize for my son," Yates said as he guided her toward the house. "He was very young when his mother passed. I fear the memory he has of her comes mostly from a portrait I commissioned shortly before her illness." Virginia nodded, unsure how to respond. "He seems like a thoughtful boy. Too thoughtful sometimes," Yates said with a small smile. "He sees things others might miss." Inside, the house was surprisingly comfortable. Simple furniture, clean floors, curtains at the windows. Not the rough bachelor quarters she had half expected. "Mrs. Fowler from town comes twice a week to help with the heavier cleaning," Yates explained, noticing her surprise. "And Thomas and I do our best in between." He showed her to a small but pleasant bedroom on the second floor. This will be yours, he stopped, coloring slightly. That is, until we're married. Then, of course, arrangements would change. But there's no rush for that. I want you to be comfortable here first. Virginia appreciated his consideration. Many mail-order marriages were performed immediately upon the bride's arrival, with no time for either party to reconsider. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I would appreciate some time to settle in. He nodded, seeming relieved. Supper will be ready in an hour. The washroom is at the end of the hall. There's hot water waiting. Left alone, Virginia sank onto the bed, her emotions in turmoil. Everything was happening so quickly. She removed the photograph from her pocket, studying Yates's younger face. The man downstairs was more weathered, his eyes holding shadows that hadn't been present when this image was captured. What had happened in those intervening years, beyond the death of his wife? She unpacked a fresh dress and her toiletries, then made her way to the washroom. The hot water was blissful after days of travel, and she felt renewed as she changed into a simple blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes. Her chestnut hair, usually pinned severely back when she'd been teaching, she arranged in a softer style. When she descended the stairs, she found Yates in the kitchen, his sleeves rolled up as he stirred something on the stove. "Can I help?" she offered. He turned and for a moment simply stared at her. "You look—" he began, then seemed to think better of whatever he'd been about to say. "Different, rested. Thank you for the hot water. It was exactly what I needed." Thomas came in from outside, his face and hands freshly washed. His eyes widened when he saw Virginia, but this time he kept his observations to himself. Dinner was a simple but delicious stew with fresh baked bread, followed by apple pie. "Mrs. Fowler left the pie," Yates admitted when she complimented the meal. "I'm afraid my cooking skills are limited to what won't kill us." Virginia laughed, surprising herself. "Then perhaps I can contribute in that area. I'm not an expert cook, but I managed well enough on my own in Boston." "You lived alone?" Thomas asked, curiosity overcoming his earlier reticence. Virginia nodded. "After my father died last year, yes." "No other family?" Yates asked quietly. "None living," she replied. It was only part of the truth. There were other reasons she had left Boston, but those were not stories for a first meeting. After dinner, Thomas reluctantly went to bed, leaving Virginia and Yates alone in the parlor. A small fire warded off the evening chill, and Virginia found herself studying the room's details, bookshelves filled with well-used volumes, a writing desk near the window, a comfortable-looking armchair with a blanket draped over it. Signs of a life already in progress, one she was preparing to join. "I feel I should apologize again for Thomas's comments," Yates said, breaking the silence. "About the resemblance." Virginia shook her head. "There's no need. Children speak their minds. Still, it must be strange for you." "It's strange for all of us, I think," she replied honestly. "This situation, getting to know each other after months of letters." Yates nodded, his gaze direct. "In my last letter, I mentioned that there would be no obligations when you arrived. That remains true. I've arranged with the minister to be available whenever if you decide you wish to proceed with our marriage. But you're welcome to stay as our guest for as long as you need to make your decision." Virginia felt a rush of gratitude for his understanding. "That's very kind. Though I should warn you, the town will talk if an unmarried woman stays under your roof for too long." A smile touched his lips. "Clearwater will talk regardless. Small towns always do." "Tell me about your ranch," Virginia said, wanting to steer the conversation to safer ground. "In your letters, you mentioned expanding." Yates's expression brightened as he spoke about his plans for the property, additional grazing land, more cattle, perhaps horses. As he talked, Virginia could see the passion he had for this place, the pride in what he'd built. "I'm sorry," he said eventually. "I've been talking too much. You must be tired." "Not at all," Virginia assured him. "It's good to hear you speak of your dreams for this place." "And what of your dreams, Miss Armstrong? Besides escaping Boston, which I gather was a priority." The question caught her off guard. In her letters, she had shared little of her reasons for leaving, focusing instead on her hopes for the future. "I wanted a fresh start," she said carefully. "A chance to build something meaningful." "A family?" he asked, his tone gentle. "Perhaps." She met his gaze. "I enjoyed teaching, but I always felt something was missing. When my father died and I found myself truly alone, I realized what that was." "Connection," Yates said. "Yes, exactly." She was surprised by his understanding. "Is that what you're seeking as well, Mr. Wilson?" He considered his answer carefully. "When Hope died, I thought I'd never want another wife. I focused entirely on Thomas and the ranch. But as time passed, I realized Thomas needs more than just a father and I." He hesitated. "I found I wasn't made for solitude." The honesty in his voice touched something in Virginia. This was the man she had come to know through his letters, thoughtful, direct, unafraid of showing vulnerability. "It's late," she said finally, rising from her chair. "I should retire." Yates stood as well. "Of course. Breakfast is usually at sunrise, but sleep as long as you need. Tomorrow I thought I might show you the rest of the property if you're interested. I'd like that very much." He walked her to the stairs, keeping a respectful distance. "Good night, Miss Armstrong." "Good night, Mr. Wilson." In her room, Virginia stood at the window, looking out at the vast darkness punctuated by stars brighter than any she'd seen in Boston. She had made it this far, traveled across the country to a place she'd never been, to marry a man she'd never met. The reality of Yates Wilson was both more and less than she had imagined. More thoughtful, less imposing. His eyes held a sadness she hadn't anticipated, but also a kindness that reassured her. Thomas was another matter entirely. His comment about her resemblance to his mother unsettled her. Was that why Yates had responded to her advertisement? Had he seen her photograph and chosen her because she reminded him of his late wife? Sleep came fitfully, her dreams filled with fragments of her past in Boston and glimpses of an uncertain future in Wyoming. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through her window and the smell of coffee drifting up from below. Virginia dressed quickly in a practical skirt and shirtwaist, pinning her hair in a simple style that would stay neat outdoors. Downstairs, she found Thomas alone in the kitchen, carefully monitoring a pan of eggs. "Pa had to check on a new calf," he explained. "He said to tell you he'll be back soon." "Can I help with breakfast?" Virginia offered. Thomas shook his head. "I've got it. Pa's teaching me to cook. Says a man should know how to feed himself." Virginia smiled, liking Yates more for this practical approach to raising his son. "That's very sensible." Thomas glanced at her as he dished up the eggs. "Are you really going to marry Pa?" Virginia chose her words carefully. "Your father and I have an agreement, but we're taking some time to get to know each other first. It's a big decision for all of us." The boy nodded thoughtfully. "If you do, would you mind if I still keep the painting of my real mother in my room?" The question pierced Virginia's heart. "Of course not, Thomas. I would never want to replace your mother or make you forget her." Relief washed over his face. "Sometimes in town, I hear ladies talking. They say Pa needs a new wife to help him forget." "I think those ladies don't understand grief very well," Virginia said gently. "We don't forget the people we've loved. We just make room in our hearts for new people too." Thomas studied her with those serious eyes. "That's what Pa says. That's why I think you might be good for him. You understand things." The door opened before Virginia could respond, and Yates entered, bringing the scent of morning air and horses with him. He'd clearly been up for hours, but he'd taken the time to clean up before returning to the house. "Good morning," he greeted Virginia. "I see Thomas has taken care of breakfast." "He's done an excellent job," Virginia confirmed, earning a proud smile from the boy. After breakfast, Yates suggested they ride out to see the property. "Thomas has lessons with Mrs. Pettigrew this morning. I'll have him back this afternoon." Virginia hesitated. "I haven't ridden in some time." "Marigold is gentle as a lamb," Yates assured her. "She'll take good care of you." True to his word, the mare he saddled for Virginia was patient and responsive. They rode at an easy pace, with Yates pointing out landmarks and boundaries, explaining his plans for different areas. Virginia was struck by the beauty of the land rolling hills, stands of cottonwood trees along a creek that cut through the property, distant mountains forming a dramatic backdrop. "It's magnificent," she said as they paused atop a rise overlooking the valley. "You've built something wonderful here." "Hope and I started with almost nothing," Yates said, his gaze distant. 10 years of hard work, some luck good and bad." Virginia hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind since her arrival. "May I ask about her? Your wife? Thomas mentioned a painting." Yates was quiet for so long that Virginia feared she had overstepped. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. Hope was strong, determined. She was a doctor's daughter from Denver who wanted adventure more than society. We met when I was driving cattle to market. She convinced her father to let her marry me, though he thought she was throwing her life away on a penniless cowboy. "She sounds remarkable," Virginia said softly. "She was." Yates turned to look at her directly. "The fever took her in 3 days. Nothing anyone could do. Thomas was 9. "I'm so sorry." "The resemblance Thomas mentioned, it's there, but it's not as strong as he believes. The color of your hair, perhaps the shape of your eyes, but Hope was." He paused. "Different, wilder in some ways. You seem more contained," Virginia suggested. Yates smiled slightly. "I was going to say thoughtful. Did you choose me because I reminded you of her?" The question came out before Virginia could stop it. To her surprise, Yates shook his head firmly. "No, I chose you because your letters were honest, because you spoke of books and ideas, not just household skills. Because you said you wanted a partnership, not just a provider." Virginia felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "That's what I want, a true partnership." "As do I," he hesitated. "But I need to be honest with you, there are complications with the ranch that I didn't fully explain in my letters." Virginia tensed. "What kind of complications?" "Financial ones, partly. The drought last year hit us hard, but there's more." He gestured toward the north. "The Blackwater Mining Company wants this land. They found silver in the mountains, and they need water rights from this valley to process the ore. And you don't want to sell. This land is Thomas's future, his inheritance. I won't sell it out from under him." Yates's jaw tightened. "But they're making things difficult. Cattle disappearing, fences cut. Nothing I can prove, but—" "That's why you needed help with the cattle yesterday," Virginia realized. "It wasn't just routine work." Yates nodded. "I should have told you before you came. I understand if this changes your mind about staying." "It doesn't," Virginia said firmly. "I didn't come all this way expecting an easy life, Mr. Wilson." "Yates," he corrected her. "If we're to be partners, you should use my given name." "Yates," she repeated, liking the feel of it on her tongue. "And I'm Virginia." They rode back toward the house in companionable silence. Virginia's mind raced with everything she'd learned. The challenges facing the ranch were significant, but somehow they made her more determined to stay, not less. Here was purpose, a real reason to be needed beyond just keeping house. As they approached the barn, Yates suddenly stiffened, his gaze fixed on the road leading to the property. "What is it?" Virginia asked, noticing his change in demeanor. "Riders coming. Stay behind me." His voice had gone hard, his hand moving to rest on the revolver at his hip. 3 men on horseback approached the yard. The leader, a well-dressed man with a neat beard, reined in his horse and tipped his hat. "Wilson, didn't expect to find you at home midday." "Vaughn," Yates acknowledged coldly. "What brings you to my property?" "Just being neighborly." "Heard you had a visitor." The man's gaze shifted to Virginia, his expression calculating. "Madam." Virginia nodded but remained silent, sensing the tension crackling between the 2 men. "Miss Armstrong is my fiancée," Yates said, the declaration causing Virginia's pulse to quicken. "Virginia, this is Edgar Vaughn. He represents Blackwater Mining." Vaughn's eyebrows rose slightly. "Congratulations are in order then. When's the happy day?" "Soon," Yates said firmly. "Now state your business and be on your way." Vaughn smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just wanted to let you know the company's offer still stands. $10,000 for the property. More than generous considering your difficulties." "Not interested," Yates replied. "Not now, not ever." Vaughn sighed dramatically. "Pride's an expensive luxury, Wilson. One you might not be able to afford much longer." He turned his attention back to Virginia. "Madam, a pleasure. I hope you know what you're getting yourself into with this one." The men rode away, leaving an uncomfortable silence in their wake. "I apologize for that," Yates said, dismounting and coming to help Virginia down from her horse. His hands at her waist were strong and steady. "No need to apologize," she assured him. "Though you might have warned me before announcing our engagement." A flush crept up Yates's neck. "I thought it best they not know you were here alone. Vaughn can be unpredictable." Virginia nodded her understanding. "What did he mean about your difficulties?" Yates's expression darkened. "The bank in Clearwater holds the mortgage on part of the property. The loan is due in 3 months. Vaughn knows I've been struggling to get the money together. And if you can't pay, I lose the north pasture and the water rights that go with it. Without those rights, the rest of the ranch becomes nearly worthless." His voice was matter of fact, but Virginia could see the worry in his eyes. "How much do you need?" $2,000. He ran a hand through his hair. "I have about half saved. The cattle I'm driving to market next month should bring another 500 if prices hold. The rest—" "I have money," Virginia said quietly. "Not a fortune, but enough to help. My father's insurance policy and what I saved from teaching." Yates looked at her sharply. "I didn't ask you here for your money, Virginia." "I know that," she said. "But if we're to be partners, your problems are my problems. I want to help." Something shifted in his expression, surprise, followed by a cautious hope. "We should discuss this further, but not now. Thomas will be home soon, and I promised him we'd all have dinner together." Virginia nodded, though she had more questions. As they walked the horses back to the barn, she was acutely aware of Yates beside her, his steady presence, the gentle way he handled the animals, the respect with which he treated her opinions. Whatever her initial doubts, she was increasingly certain she'd made the right choice in coming to Wyoming. The next few days settled into a rhythm. Virginia helped with household tasks, got to know Thomas better, and explored the immediate surroundings of the ranch. Each evening, she and Yates would talk after Thomas went to bed, sharing stories from their pasts and discussing plans for the future. Despite the uncertainty hanging over the ranch, Virginia found herself feeling more at home than she ever had in Boston. On her 5th day at the ranch, Virginia ventured into town with Yates to purchase supplies. Clearwater was small but growing. A general store, hotel, saloon, blacksmith, and a handful of other businesses lined the main street. As they tied their horses outside the general store, Virginia noticed several women watching her with undisguised curiosity. "Word travels fast," Yates murmured, following her gaze. I expected as much, Virginia replied, straightening her hat. Shall we give them something to talk about? A smile tugged at Yates's lips as he offered her his arm. Mrs. Jenkins runs the store. She's also the most notorious gossip in 3 counties. Inside, a plump woman with shrewd eyes greeted them warmly. Mr. Wilson, and this must be your bride-to-be we've been hearing about. Miss Virginia Armstrong, Yates introduced her. Virginia, this is Mrs. Jenkins. A pleasure, Virginia said politely. Your town is charming. From Boston, I hear. Quite a change for you. A welcome one, Virginia assured her, aware that her response would be repeated throughout Clearwater before sundown. As they gathered supplies, Virginia could feel Mrs. Jenkins evaluating her, no doubt comparing her to the memory of Hope Wilson. Several other customers entered, each finding transparent excuses to introduce themselves to Virginia. She maintained her composure, answering questions politely but firmly redirecting those that became too personal. You handle them well, Yates observed quietly as they loaded their purchases into the wagon. Like a school teacher managing overeager students, Virginia laughed. Not so different, really. People are curious by nature. They're wondering if you'll stay, Yates said, his voice more serious. This country isn't easy on women. Many go back east after trying frontier life. I'm not many women, Virginia replied, and I have no intention of going back to Boston. There's nothing for me there but painful memories. Yates studied her face. Someday you'll have to tell me what you're running from. Someday, she agreed, but not today. That evening, after Thomas had gone to bed, Virginia found Yates at his desk, frowning over account books. Bad news, she asked, bringing him a cup of coffee. He sighed, accepting the cup gratefully. Not worse than before, just trying to see if there's anything I've overlooked. Virginia sat in the chair opposite him. Yates, I want to help. My savings could make the difference. He looked up, his expression troubled. If we were already married, that would be one thing, but we're not. I can't take your money, Virginia. Then let's get married, she said, the words surprising even herself with their directness. Yates stared at her, his blue eyes widening. Are you certain? It's only been a few days. I knew your character from your letters. Being here has only confirmed what I already believed, that you're a good man, a loving father, and someone I could build a life with. Virginia met his gaze steadily. I don't expect romance, Yates. I came here for partnership, and that's what you've offered. You deserve romance, he said quietly. Perhaps we both do, she replied. But right now we need practicality. Marriage would solve several problems at once: the financial issues, the town gossip, my position here. Yates set down his pen. I won't deny the practical benefits, but marriage should be more than a business arrangement, Virginia. It will be, she said confidently. We respect each other. We share values and goals. The rest can grow with time. He was silent for a long moment, studying her face. Finally, he nodded. All right. If you're certain, we'll speak to Reverend Cooper tomorrow. That night, Virginia lay awake, her mind racing. Had she been too forward? Was she rushing into this marriage out of fear rather than conviction? But each time doubt crept in, she reminded herself of the alternative: returning to Boston, to the whispers and accusatory glances, to the memory of shame and betrayal that had driven her west in the first place. No, marrying Yates was the right decision. He was nothing like Charles Hammond, the school superintendent who had pursued her relentlessly, then turned vicious when she rejected his advances. Charles had used his position to spread lies about her, gradually destroying her reputation and forcing her resignation. By the time she'd placed the matrimonial advertisement, she'd been desperate for escape. Yates Wilson was different. He was honest, straightforward, respectful of her boundaries. And if there wasn't the passionate love she'd once dreamed of, perhaps that was for the best. Passion had a way of turning to poison, as she'd learned painfully with Charles. The next morning they rode into town together to see Reverend Cooper. Thomas accompanied them, his face solemn as they explained their plans. "You're sure about this?" the Reverend asked Virginia privately while Yates and Thomas waited outside. "Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, especially to a man you've known such a short time." "I'm certain," Virginia replied. "Mr. Wilson is exactly the man he represented himself to be in his letters." "And the boy? You're prepared to be a mother to him," Virginia smiled softly. "Thomas is a wonderful child. Being his mother would be an honor, not a burden." The Reverend nodded, apparently satisfied. "Very well. I can perform the ceremony on Sunday after services, if that suits." Sunday was just 3 days away. Virginia felt a flutter of nervousness but nodded her agreement. That would be perfect. When they returned to the ranch, Thomas was uncharacteristically quiet. As Yates went to check on the cattle, Virginia found the boy sitting alone on the porch steps. "Would you like to talk about it?" she asked, sitting beside him. Thomas picked at a splinter in the wooden step. "Are you marrying Pa because of me?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" I heard Mrs. Fowler telling her sister that mail-order brides only come for the land or the money, that they don't really want to be mothers to another woman's children. Virginia felt a surge of protectiveness toward this serious, vulnerable boy. "Thomas, look at me." She waited until he met her eyes. "I came here to marry your father because his letters showed me he was a good, honest man. Being your stepmother isn't a burden, it's a privilege I hope to earn." "Really?" Hope flickered in his eyes. "Really," she confirmed. "In fact, I've brought something I thought we might enjoy together." She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small, worn volume. "This was my favorite book when I was about your age, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Have you read it?" Thomas shook his head, his interest piqued. "Perhaps we could read it together in the evenings, a chapter each night." The boy's face lit up. "I'd like that." That evening, after supper, Virginia kept her promise, reading the first chapter while Thomas listened, enthralled. Yates sat nearby, ostensibly reviewing papers, but Virginia noticed he was listening just as intently as his son. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Mrs. Fowler came to help clean the house thoroughly, bringing with her a dress she'd altered for Virginia to wear for the wedding. "It was my daughter's," she explained. "She's moved to Denver now with her husband. It's not fancy, but it's proper for a bride." The dress was simple but lovely, cream-colored with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Virginia was touched by the gesture. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "It's beautiful." Mrs. Fowler studied her with shrewd eyes. "You'll do right by them," she said finally. "That boy needs a mother's hand, and Yates has been alone too long." On Sunday morning, Virginia dressed carefully, her hands trembling slightly as she fastened the buttons on Mrs. Fowler's dress. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a woman both familiar and strange, the same chestnut hair and blue eyes, but with a determination in her expression that hadn't been there in Boston. Thomas knocked on her door, looking uncomfortable but handsome in his best clothes. "Pa sent me to see if you're ready," he said. "The wagon's out front." Virginia took a deep breath. "I'm ready." Downstairs, Yates waited, wearing a clean shirt and his least worn trousers. He'd trimmed his hair and beard, and the sight of him tall and steady calmed Virginia's nerves. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering her a small bouquet of wildflowers. "Thomas gathered these this morning." "Thank you," she said, taking the flowers. "Both of you." The church in Clearwater was small but well-maintained. As they entered, Virginia was surprised to see several people already seated in the pews: Mrs. Jenkins and her husband, the blacksmith and his family, Mr. Grayson, who had helped bring her from the stagecoach, and several others she hadn't yet met. "Word gets around," Yates murmured, looking slightly embarrassed. Reverend Cooper conducted a simple ceremony. Virginia spoke her vows clearly, looking into Yates's eyes as she promised to love, honor, and cherish him. When Yates slid a plain gold band onto her finger Hope's ring, he'd explained earlier, if she didn't mind wearing it, Virginia felt a sense of rightness settle over her. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the Reverend declared. "You may kiss your bride." Yates hesitated, then leaned forward to place a gentle, chaste kiss on Virginia's lips. Brief as it was, Virginia felt an unexpected warmth spread through her. The small congregation applauded, and Thomas stepped forward to stand beside them, completing the family picture. As they turned to walk back down the aisle, Virginia caught sight of Edgar Vaughn standing at the back of the church, his expression unreadable. Outside, their neighbors offered congratulations and well wishes. Mrs. Jenkins had organized a small reception with cake and punch in the church hall, and Virginia found herself surrounded by women eager to welcome her to the community. "Don't let Vaughn bother you, Mrs. Fowler said quietly, noticing Virginia's gaze drift to where the mining representative stood talking with some of the men. "He's been trying to buy up half the valley, not just Yates's place." "Why is he so determined?" Virginia asked. "Silver's been discovered in the northern hills. Blackwater mining needs water for their operations, and the creek that runs through Yates's property is the most reliable source for miles." Virginia absorbed this information, understanding better why the company was putting such pressure on her new husband. Later, as they prepared to leave, Vaughn approached them directly. "Congratulations on your nuptials," he said smoothly. "Mrs. Wilson, a pleasure to meet you properly." "Mr. Vaughn," Virginia acknowledged coolly. "I hope you'll reconsider our offer," he continued, addressing Yates. $10,000 would provide a comfortable new start for your expanded family." "My answer hasn't changed," Yates replied firmly. "This land stays in the Wilson family." Vaughn's smile hardened. "Family land is only valuable if you can keep it." "I understand the bank's deadline is approaching. Would be a shame if something happened to those cattle you're counting on for the mortgage payment." The threat was thinly veiled. Virginia felt Yates tense beside her. "Is that a threat, Vaughn?" Yates asked quietly. "Just an observation about the uncertainty of ranching." Vaughn tipped his hat. "Good day to you both." As they drove home in the wagon, Thomas chattering excitedly about the cake and the well wishes, Virginia observed her new husband's troubled expression. "We'll find a way," she said quietly, placing her hand over his on the reins. Yates glanced at her, surprise giving way to something warmer. "Together," he agreed. That evening, after a celebratory dinner, Thomas went to bed early, worn out from the excitement of the day. Virginia found herself alone with Yates, her husband, for the first time since the ceremony. "I've moved my things to the main bedroom," he said, seeming slightly uncomfortable. "But I can sleep in the spare room if you prefer, until you're ready." Virginia appreciated his consideration but shook her head. "We're married now, Yates. I'm not afraid to share a room with you." His eyes met hers, searching. "I don't want to rush you. This has all happened very quickly." "Life happens quickly sometimes," she replied. "I made my choice with open eyes." Later, as they prepared for bed, Virginia felt a flutter of nervousness. Her nightdress, though modest, suddenly seemed revealing. Yates, sensing her discomfort, turned his back to give her privacy as she changed. When they finally lay side by side in the darkness, a careful distance between them, Virginia found herself acutely aware of his presence, the sound of his breathing, the warmth radiating from his body. "Virginia," he said softly, "I want you to know something. I may not have courted you properly, but I will be a good husband to you. I promise you that." She turned toward him, able to make out his profile in the dim moonlight filtering through the curtains. "I believe you, and I will be a good wife to you, Yates." His hand found hers under the covers, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Sleep well, Mrs. Wilson." "Good night, Mr. Wilson," she replied, a smile in her voice. Despite the unfamiliarity of the situation, Virginia fell asleep quickly, comforted by Yates's steady presence beside her. The next morning brought a return to routine, though everything felt different now. Virginia was no longer a guest, but the mistress of the household. As she prepared breakfast, she felt a sense of ownership and purpose that had been missing in her life for too long. Yates came in from the barn, stopping short when he saw her at the stove. "You didn't have to get up so early." "I wanted to," she replied, pouring him coffee. "I thought we could discuss the financial situation after breakfast." He nodded, accepting the cup with a grateful smile. "I need to be straight with you, Virginia. Things are tighter than I let on initially. Even with a good price for the cattle, we'll still be short for the mortgage payment." "How much will we need?" "About $700, if nothing else goes wrong." He ran a hand through his hair. "I've considered selling some of the horses, but good stock is hard to replace." Virginia took a deep breath. "I have nearly $1,000, my father's insurance money and my savings." Yates stared at her in disbelief. "That much?" "I lived simply in Boston," she explained. "And teaching paid reasonably well." He shook his head slowly. "I can't ask you to give up your security. That money is your safety net." "It's our safety net now," Virginia corrected him. "And I'd rather use it to secure our home than hold on to it out of fear." The look Yates gave her was filled with something she couldn't quite name: gratitude, admiration, and perhaps something deeper. "Thank you," he said simply. "We'll pay the mortgage and use what's left to improve the ranch, make it more profitable so we're never in this position again." Thomas came downstairs then, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Are we still going to read more of Tom Sawyer tonight?" he asked Virginia. "Absolutely," she promised. "I wouldn't miss it." The next week settled into a new rhythm. Virginia took over management of the household accounts, applying the same meticulous attention she'd once given to her classroom ledgers. She was surprised to find how much she enjoyed the work, making the ranch more efficient, finding small ways to save or earn extra money. Yates noticed her efforts. "You have a good head for business," he observed one evening as she balanced the books. "My father was a businessman," Virginia explained. "He taught me the importance of careful accounting." "What did he think of you becoming a teacher instead of following in his footsteps?" Virginia's expression clouded slightly. "He supported my choice, said teaching was a noble profession, but I think he always hoped I'd marry a businessman and put my skills to use that way." "And instead, you've married a rancher," Yates said with a rueful smile. "A rancher who's building something valuable," Virginia corrected him. "This place will be Thomas's legacy someday. That's worth more than any city business." Yates reached across the table to cover her hand with his. "I'm grateful every day that you answered my advertisement." The simple touch sent warmth spreading up Virginia's arm. These moments of connection had been growing more frequent between them, a hand at the small of her back as they walked, fingers brushing as they passed items at the table, sitting closer together in the evenings as they read or talked. 2 weeks after their wedding, Yates announced it was time to drive the cattle to market in Cheyenne. "I'll be gone for about 10 days, he explained. "Thomas usually stays with the Graysons while I'm away, but if you'd prefer, he stay here with you." "Of course he should stay here," Virginia said immediately. "We'll manage fine together." Thomas looked pleased at this development. "Can we keep reading Tom Sawyer while Pa's gone?" "Every night," Virginia promised. "And maybe you could help me with some special projects around the house as well." The morning of Yates's departure, Virginia rose early to prepare a hearty breakfast and pack food for his journey. As he loaded his saddlebags, she felt an unexpected anxiety at the thought of his absence. "Be careful," she said, handing him the package of food. "Always am." He hesitated, then stepped closer, one hand coming up to touch her cheek gently. "I'll miss you, both of you." "We'll miss you too," Virginia replied, her voice softer than she'd intended. Yates leaned down and kissed her, not the brief, chaste kiss of their wedding, but something warmer and more lingering. When he pulled away, Virginia felt slightly breathless. 10 days, he promised. No more. As Virginia and Thomas waved goodbye to Yates, and the two ranch hands accompanying him with the cattle, she felt a curious mix of emotions: concern for his safety, determination to manage well in his absence, and a lingering warmth from his kiss. The first few days without Yates passed smoothly. Virginia and Thomas settled into their own routine: lessons in the morning, chores in the afternoon, reading by the fire in the evening. Thomas proved to be a bright, eager student, soaking up knowledge with an enthusiasm that reminded Virginia how much she'd enjoyed teaching. On the fourth day, Mr. Grayson rode out to check on them. "Everything all right out here?" he asked, accepting the coffee Virginia offered him. "We're managing well," Virginia assured him. "Has there been any word from the cattle drive?" "Not yet, but that's normal. They should reach Cheyenne tomorrow or the next day." He hesitated. "Mrs. Wilson, I should warn you, there's been talk in town. Vaughn's been hiring men rough sorts, not local." Virginia felt a chill of apprehension. "What for?" "Nobody knows for certain, but with Yates gone." He left the implication hanging. "You think they might try something with the ranch?" Grayson shrugged. "Just wanted you to be aware. Keep the doors locked at night, and if you need anything, send Thomas for me right away." After he left, Virginia checked the rifle Yates kept over the fireplace, making sure it was loaded as he'd shown her before he left. She didn't share these precautions with Thomas, not wanting to frighten him, but she found herself listening more carefully to the night sounds around the ranch. 2 nights later, Virginia was awakened by the sound of horses in the yard. She rose quickly, pulling on a robe and grabbing the rifle before going to the window. In the moonlight, she could make out 3 riders circling the barn. Heart pounding, she hurried to Thomas's room. "Thomas," she whispered, shaking him gently. "Wake up." The boy stirred, blinking up at her. "What's wrong?" "There are men outside. I need you to go out the back way and run to the Grayson place." "Can you do that?" Thomas nodded, fully awake now. "Is it Vaughn's men?" "Like Mr. Grayson warned about?" "I don't know, but I want you safe." Virginia helped him pull on his boots. "Go through the kitchen and stay in the shadows. Don't stop for anything." "What about you?" he asked, his young face serious in the darkness. "I'll be fine. I just need to make sure they don't damage anything before help arrives." She gave him a quick hug. "Be careful. Go now." After Thomas slipped out, Virginia positioned herself at the front window with the rifle. The men had dismounted and were approaching the barn with lanterns. One carried what looked like a can of kerosene. They meant to burn the barn with all the horses and winter hay inside. Without thinking, Virginia threw open the front door and stepped onto the porch, rifle raised. "Stop right there," she called, her voice steadier than she felt. The men froze, turning toward her voice. "This is private property," Virginia continued. "Leave now or I'll shoot." One of the men laughed. "Look here, boys. Wilson's mail-order bride thinks she's Annie Oakley." "I don't have to be Annie Oakley to hit a target as big as a barn door," Virginia retorted, raising the rifle to her shoulder the way Yates had shown her. She fired a warning shot into the air. The men scattered, cursing. "Crazy woman." "Next one won't be a warning," Virginia called. "Drop the kerosene and get off this property." For a tense moment, she thought they might rush her. Then the sound of approaching horses came from the direction of the Grayson farm. The intruders hesitated, then ran for their own mounts, disappearing into the night just as Mr. Grayson and two other men rode into the yard. "Mrs. Wilson," Thomas said there was trouble. Virginia lowered the rifle, suddenly aware of how badly her hands were shaking. They were going to burn the barn. Mr. Grayson dismounted quickly, coming to her side. "Are you hurt?" "No, they didn't get the chance to do anything." She took a deep breath. "Where's Thomas?" "Safe with my wife. I'll send one of the boys to fetch him back now that the danger's past." Virginia nodded gratefully. "Thank you for coming so quickly." "Those were Vaughn's men," one of the other riders said grimly. "I recognized Carson, who works for the mining company." Mr. Grayson's expression hardened. "This has gone too far. Threatening women and children is beyond the pale. We need to send word to the sheriff in the morning." Virginia agreed, though she doubted what good it would do. Without proof, it would be their word against Vaughn's, and mining companies had influence with local law enforcement. Thomas returned, running to Virginia and hugging her tightly. "I was so scared for you." "I'm fine," she assured him, stroking his hair. "Thanks to your quick action getting help." Mr. Grayson and his friends insisted on staying the night to keep watch. Virginia was grateful for their presence, though she found it impossible to return to sleep. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table, a cup of cold coffee before her, thinking about Yates. He would be furious when he learned what had happened, not at her, but at the danger his family had been placed in. Virginia realized with a start that she was thinking of herself and Thomas as Yates's family, not just his legal obligations. Somewhere in the past weeks, this ranch and these people had become home in a way Boston never had. The next morning, Virginia rode into town with Mr. Grayson to speak with the telegraph operator. She sent a brief message to Yates in Cheyenne, letting him know there had been trouble, but that she and Thomas were safe. She deliberately kept the details vague, not wanting to worry him or rush his business in town. As they left the telegraph office, Virginia spotted Edgar Vaughn across the street, speaking with several well-dressed men outside the hotel. "Investors," Mr. Grayson muttered. "He's been bringing them in from Denver to see the mining operation." Making a sudden decision, Virginia crossed the street, ignoring Mr. Grayson's startled protest. "Mr. Vaughn," she called, approaching the group. "A word, if you please." Vaughn turned, surprise crossing his features before he smoothed them into a polite smile. "Mrs. Wilson, what brings you to town?" "I think you know," she replied coldly. "3 men tried to burn our barn last night, men who work for your company." The investors exchanged uncomfortable glances. "That's a serious accusation," Vaughn said, his smile fading. "One I categorically deny." "Deny it all you want," Virginia said, keeping her voice steady. "But you should know that we've telegraphed the territorial marshal and we have witnesses who identified your employees." This wasn't strictly true, but Vaughn didn't need to know that. "Mrs. Wilson, I understand you're upset." "No, you don't understand," Virginia interrupted. "What you've done isn't just illegal, it's foolish. My husband has no intention of selling that land, not now, not ever. The sooner you accept that and look for alternatives, the better for everyone." One of the investors, an older man with an impressive mustache, cleared his throat. "Vaughn, what exactly is going on here?" "Nothing, Mr. Harrington. Just a misunderstanding with one of the local ranchers." "It sounds like more than a misunderstanding," the investor observed. "It sounds like intimidation tactics." Virginia seized the opportunity. Blackwater Mining has been pressuring several local landowners to sell water rights. When persuasion failed, they've resorted to increasingly aggressive methods. "That's not how we do business, Vaughn," Harrington said sharply. "I made that clear from the beginning." Vaughn's face had reddened with anger or embarrassment. "Mrs. Wilson is exaggerating a simple property dispute. Burning down barns with animals inside isn't a property dispute," Virginia retorted. "It's arson and animal cruelty at minimum." Harrington turned to Vaughn. "I think we need to continue our discussions in private. Mrs. Wilson, thank you for bringing this to our attention." Virginia nodded, recognizing the dismissal. She'd said what she needed to say. Whether it would have any effect remained to be seen, but she'd planted a seed of doubt among Vaughn's investors. Mr. Grayson was waiting for her, his expression a mix of concern and admiration. "That was either very brave or very foolish," he said as they walked back to their horses. "Perhaps both," Virginia admitted. "But I'm tired of being afraid. This is our home, and I won't let them threaten us." The next several days passed without incident. Virginia kept Thomas close to the house, and Mr. Grayson arranged for one of his hired hands to stay at the Wilson ranch until Yates returned. The young man, Jim, slept in the barn and helped with the chores, providing both protection and practical assistance. 9 days after Yates's departure, Virginia was hanging laundry in the yard when Thomas shouted from the porch, "Riders coming." Her heart leapt, thinking it might be Yates returning early, but as the group came into view, she recognized Edgar Vaughn among them. Beside him rode the investor from town, Harrington, and several other men Virginia didn't know. "Stay on the porch, Thomas," she called, moving to meet the approaching group. Jim emerged from the barn, rifle in hand, positioning himself nearby. Vaughn reined in his horse, tipping his hat with exaggerated politeness. "Mrs. Wilson, I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, but Mr. Harrington and his associates wish to speak with you directly." Virginia nodded cautiously, her gaze shifting to the older man. "Mr. Harrington, Mrs. Wilson," he replied, dismounting with the stiffness of a man unused to long rides. "I've had extensive discussions with Mr. Vaughn regarding the situation with your property." "And," Virginia prompted when he paused, "and I believe we've been approaching this from entirely the wrong angle. May we speak somewhere more comfortable? I assure you we come in peace." Virginia hesitated, then nodded. "You may come inside. Your men will need to wait out here." Harrington agreed readily, following Virginia to the house with Vaughn trailing behind, looking distinctly uncomfortable. Thomas watched them warily from the doorway. "This is my stepson, Thomas," Virginia introduced. "Thomas, this is Mr. Harrington from Denver." "Your father raised you in a fine home, young man," Harrington observed, looking around the well-maintained interior of the house. "Yes, sir," Thomas replied, still suspicious. "He worked hard for it." In the parlor, Virginia invited Harrington to sit but remained standing herself. "What proposal have you come to make, Mr. Harrington?" The investor smiled slightly. "Direct. I appreciate that. Mrs. Wilson, instead of buying your land, Blackwater Mining would like to negotiate for limited water rights only. We're prepared to offer a fair annual payment for access to the creek at specific times and in controlled amounts." Virginia blinked in surprise. This was not what she'd expected. "That's a significant change from your previous position." "Yes, well," Harrington cast a sidelong glance at Vaughn, "I've made it clear to Mr. Vaughn that our company operates ethically or not at all. His methods were unacceptable." "I see." Virginia considered the offer. "Of course, I can't make any decisions without my husband. He should return within the next day or two." "Naturally," Harrington agreed. "We'll leave the details of our proposal for your review. All I ask is that you consider it with an open mind." "We will," Virginia promised. "Though I should warn you that my husband feels strongly about maintaining control of his property." "As he should," Harrington said, surprising her again. A man's land is his legacy, but I believe there's room for compromise that benefits us both. After the men left, Thomas turned to Virginia with wide eyes. Are we going to sell the water rights? That's for your father to decide, Virginia said carefully, but it's a very different offer from what they made before. Because of what you did in town, Thomas said, his voice filled with admiration. You scared them. Virginia laughed. I don't think I scared anyone, but sometimes standing firm is the only way to earn respect. That evening, as they sat reading Tom Sawyer by the fire, they heard the sound of horses in the yard. Thomas jumped up, rushing to the window. It's Pa, he shouted, already running for the door. Virginia followed more slowly, her heart suddenly pounding. After nearly 2 weeks apart, she found herself nervous about seeing Yates again. He was dismounting when she reached the porch, his face weary but breaking into a smile when he saw them. Thomas reached him first, launching himself into his father's arms with uninhibited joy. Whoa there, Yates laughed, hugging his son tightly. Careful, or you'll knock us both over. His eyes found Virginia over Thomas's head, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. He set Thomas down and approached the porch, removing his hat as he climbed the steps. Virginia, he said simply. Welcome home, she replied, suddenly shy. Yates stepped closer, hesitating only briefly before pulling her into his arms. She went willingly, breathing in the scent of him, dust from the trail, the leather of his saddle, something uniquely him beneath it all. I got your telegram, he murmured against her hair. What happened? Later, she whispered. It's resolved now. Everyone's safe. He pulled back slightly, studying her face as if to reassure himself she was unharmed. Then, with Thomas watching and grinning, Yates kissed her a real kiss, not tentative or cautious, but confident and claiming. When they separated, Virginia felt flushed and slightly breathless. You must be hungry, she managed to say. There's stew keeping warm. Yates laughed, the sound warming her from within. Always practical. Yes, I'm starving. But first, he reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a small package. I brought something for you. Inside the simple brown paper was a delicate silver hairpin with a small pearl. It's beautiful, Virginia said, genuinely touched. The cattle brought a good price, Yates explained. Better than I'd hoped. I wanted you to have something, just because. The gift was more meaningful than any expensive jewelry could have been, a symbol that he'd thought of her, wanted to please her, even in the midst of important business. Later, after Thomas had gone to bed, Virginia and Yates sat together at the kitchen table. She told him everything that had happened in his absence: the attempted burning of the barn, her confrontation with Vaughn in town, and finally Harrington's new proposal. You confronted Vaughn in front of his investors? Yates asked, his expression a mix of concern and admiration. Virginia, that was dangerous. It was effective, she countered, and I was in a public place. He couldn't very well threaten me there. Yates shook his head slowly. I leave for 10 days and come back to find my wife has single-handedly faced down a mining company. Not single-handedly, Virginia corrected. Mr. Grayson and the others were a great help, still. Yates reached across the table to take her hand. I'm proud of you and grateful. Not many women would have defended a new home so fiercely. It's my home now, Virginia said simply. Our home. Yates's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, sending pleasant shivers up her arm. What do you think of Harrington's offer? I think it's worth considering, she replied honestly. The annual payment would provide security, and if the terms are carefully defined to protect our primary water needs. You've thought this through. I've had little else to do but think with you gone, Virginia admitted. Yates's expression softened. Did you miss me then? Yes, she said quietly. More than I expected to. He stood, drawing her to her feet and into his arms. I missed you every day, thought about you every night. Virginia leaned into him, savoring his solid warmth. I was afraid, she confessed. Not just of Vaughn's men, but that you might regret our marriage, that it was too rushed, too practical. Never, Yates said firmly. He tipped her chin up, making her meet his gaze. Virginia, I married you for practical reasons, yes. But these past weeks, getting to know you, seeing your strength and your kindness with Thomas, I find myself wanting more than just a practical arrangement. Her heart seemed to stop, then race forward. What do you want, Yates? A true marriage, he said softly. In every sense. If you'll have me. Virginia's answer was to rise on her toes and kiss him, her arms sliding around his neck. He responded immediately, gathering her closer, his kiss deepening with a hunger that matched the awakening need within her. Later, in the bedroom that was truly theirs now, Virginia discovered that passion without love was indeed hollow, as she had once feared, but passion with growing love was transformative. Yates was gentle, patient, attentive to her responses. When they finally lay tangled together in the aftermath, Virginia felt as though something fundamental had shifted between them. I never expected this, she whispered, her head resting on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. What? Yates asked, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder, to find love again, to want to. He went still beneath her. Love, Virginia raised herself on one elbow to look at him. Is that word too soon, too much? Yates's hand came up to cup her cheek. Not too soon. Not nearly enough. He drew her down for a tender kiss. I love you, Virginia Wilson. I think I started falling in love with you from your first letter, but I didn't dare hope you might come to love me too. The following morning, Virginia woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains and the unfamiliar but welcome weight of Yates's arm around her waist. She lay still, savoring the moment, until the sounds of Thomas moving around downstairs reminded her of her responsibilities. Carefully extracting herself from Yates's embrace, she dressed and went downstairs to find Thomas attempting to prepare breakfast. I wanted to let you and Pa sleep, he explained, looking slightly guilty as he stood amid the chaos of flour and eggshells. Virginia smiled, touched by his thoughtfulness. Thank you, Thomas. That was very kind. Shall we finish it together? As they worked side by side, Thomas seemed to be gathering his courage for something. Finally, he blurted out, Are you going to stay now? For good, Virginia paused in her mixing. Of course I am. I'm married to your father. But lots of mail-order brides leave, Thomas persisted. Billy Haskins's new mother left after just 2 months, said she couldn't stand Wyoming and went back east. Understanding dawned. Despite everything they'd been through together, Thomas still harbored fears that she would abandon them. Thomas, Virginia said gently, I'm not going anywhere. This is my home now. You and your father are my family. The boy looked at her with those serious eyes that saw too much. Do you love Pa? The directness of the question didn't surprise her this time. Yes, I do, very much. And do you maybe love me a little bit too? His voice was small, vulnerable in a way that broke her heart. Virginia set down the bowl and knelt to be at eye level with him. Thomas Wilson, I love you exactly as if you were my own son. Nothing will ever change that. The boy's face crumpled slightly, and he threw his arms around her neck in a fierce hug. I love you too, he whispered. I'm glad you came to marry Pa, even though you'd never met him. So am I, Virginia said, holding him close. It was the best decision I ever made. What was? Yates asked from the doorway, his hair still rumpled from sleep. Thomas pulled back from Virginia, slightly embarrassed but smiling. Virginia says she loves us and she's never leaving. Is that so? Yates asked, his eyes warm as they met Virginia's. It's so, she confirmed, rising to her feet. You're stuck with me, I'm afraid. What a terrible fate, he teased, coming to drop a kiss on her forehead. Stuck with the most beautiful, intelligent, brave woman in Wyoming territory. Thomas made a face at their display of affection, but his eyes shone with happiness. Over the next few weeks, they settled into their new reality as a true family. Yates met with Harrington and negotiated favorable terms for limited water rights, securing both the ranch's future and a steady income from the mining company. Vaughn was transferred to another operation, much to everyone's relief. Summer turned to fall, bringing with it a rich golden light that bathed the ranch in warmth. Virginia expanded the vegetable garden and learned to preserve the harvest for winter. Thomas thrived under her tutelage, his natural intelligence flourishing with regular lessons. And Yates blossomed in ways Virginia hadn't anticipated. The worried crease between his brows appeared less frequently. He laughed more, sang sometimes as he worked, and looked at Virginia with an openness that made her heart swell. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in spectacular colors, Virginia shared the news she'd been keeping to herself for the past week. "I visited Dr. Williams in town yesterday," she said, her fingers laced with Yates's. He turned to her immediately, concern in his eyes. "Are you unwell?" "Just the opposite," Virginia smiled. "I'm with child." Yates stared at her for a long moment, then let out a whoop of joy that startled the chickens in the nearby yard. He pulled her from her chair into his lap, kissing her soundly. "When?" he asked when they finally broke apart. "Early spring, the doctor thinks. March, perhaps." Yates placed his hand reverently on her still flat stomach. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "Our baby. Should we tell Thomas now?" Virginia asked. "Or wait a bit longer?" "Now," Yates decided. He should have time to get used to the idea of being a big brother. Thomas took the news with characteristic seriousness at first, asking practical questions about where the baby would sleep and whether it would cry all night. But as the reality sank in, his excitement grew, especially when Virginia suggested he could help choose a name. That night, as Virginia lay in Yates's arms, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she had been a disgraced schoolteacher, fleeing scandal and heartbreak in Boston. Now she was a wife, a mother to Thomas, and soon to be mother to another child, building a life on this beautiful, challenging land. "What are you thinking about?" Yates asked, his voice rumbling beneath her ear. "How strange life is," she replied. "How the worst moments can lead to the best ones if you're brave enough to keep going." Yates pressed a kiss to her temple. "I thank God every day that you were brave enough to come west. To marry a man you'd never met. A man who turned out to be everything his letters promised and more," Virginia said, snuggling closer. "I'd travel twice the distance for what we've found together." "And what's that, Mrs. Wilson?" Yates asked, though the tenderness in his voice suggested he already knew the answer. "Home," Virginia said simply. "Love, family, everything that matters." Outside, the stars emerged one by one in the vast Wyoming sky, bearing witness to the miracle of two lives that had found each other against all odds, a cowboy and the woman who had traveled across a continent to marry him, unaware that she was walking toward not just a new beginning, but a great love that would sustain them through all the seasons to come.